There is a practical necessity to know about the military history of India and the perspective it gives on the critical aspects of warfare in the subcontinent to defend India. Because the maxim is so evident, its centrality in deciding the fortunes of India at critical junctures in our history has been overlooked for the most part. Geography is also a crucial aspect of war, because terrain dictates both strategy and tactics and decides destiny-changing outcomes. Intertwined with terrain is climate. Together, they author and alter history, and nowhere is this more pronounced than in India. Some of you might ask these two questions of what the practical use of medieval military history is in today's world, and whether it is an unprofitable act of pedantry. One such eminent figure of the medieval period, which I personally find fascinating, is Sher Shah Suri. He is one man of that time under whose administration his army never lost. Suri, born as Farid Khan, was one of the most influential figures whose ascension to the throne marks a turning point in the medieval period. On the throne from 1540 to 1545, he left an indelible mark on the socio-political framework of India. He deliberated on efficient and accountable governmental practices emerging from the effective administrative reforms imposed by him. Alongside, he also introduced a standardized currency, well-organized postal system, and a network of roads and highways, today famously known as the Grand Trunk Road.
History plays an important role in shaping the future of a nation. Among the great kings and queens who played lead roles in spectacular drama of India's past, Babur and Humayun hold very important positions. Babur, who distinguished himself as a warrior and writer, was the founder of Mughal Empire in India. He was the true heir of Genghis Khan and Amir Timur. Babur ruled in North India for only 4 years, from 1526 to 1530 Common Era, fighting battles all the time. His time saw the popularization of gunpowder and artillery in India. For the first time since the downfall of Kushan Empire, Kabul and Kandahar became integral parts of Mughal Empire. By dominating them, Babur and his successors were able to protect India from external invasions for almost 200 years. Humayun expanded the frontiers of the empire, but lost it to Afghan ruler Sher Shah Suri, who drove him into exile. Humayun took refuge in the court of Safavid ruler of Iran. In 1555, Humayun defeated Sher Shah Suri. You must have heard Humayun being described as he tumbled through life and tumbled out of it. I have a strong aversion towards Mughals for the fact that they could do anything to gain power, be it killing of their blood relatives.
The Vijayanagara Empire, also called the Karnataka Kingdom, was a medieval Indian empire that covered much of the region of South India, ruling the land of modern states of Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Goa, and some parts of Telangana and Maharashtra. It was established in 1336 by the brothers Harihara and Bukka, first of Sangam dynasty, members of a pastoralist cowherd community that claimed Yadav lineage. The empire rose to prominence as a culmination of attempts by the southern powers to ward off Turco-Persian Islamic invasion by the end of the 13th century. It lasted until 1646, although its power declined after a major military defeat in the Battle of Talikota in 1565 by combined armies of Deccan sultanates. The empire is named after its capital city of Vijayanagar, whose ruins present-day Hampi. The challenge that forced the Vijayanagar Empire at the time, as well as the empire's size, and one of a kind of situation that required a vast and powerful army and military system to sustain its stability and maintain its border.
Letters are sign of things, symbols of words, whose power is so great that without a voice they speak to us the words by the eyes, not by the ears. What is medieval period? Medieval period is a period between ancient period and modern period. Early medieval period is also known as Dark Ages. This age showed regional and political progress. A lot of dynasty and empires was formed during this period. When medieval period was started, medieval period is divided into two parts, early medieval period and late medieval period. Early medieval period was started from 6th century and ended with 13th century. Late medieval period was started from the end of early medieval period, 13th century, and ended with 16th century. We get to know about medieval period was started with Muhammad bin Qasim from many manuscripts and books. More important one is Chachnama. But who is Muhammad bin Qasim? Muhammad bin Qasim was born 31 December 695 AD and died 18 July 715 AD at the age of 20. His father name was Muhammad Hakam and his mother name was Habibat Uzma. He was the commander of Al-Hazaz, who sent him to capture the land and take revenge. मोहम्मद बिन कासिम के साथ यह काल था शुरू हुआ, अल-हजाज का सेनापति भारत को नामंजूर हुआ, सिंध पर हमला करने वाले सिंध को हराया था, दाहिर को घुटनों पर लाकर अपना राज बसाया था, सीधा सिंध पर ना आकर मकरान से आगाज किया, मकरान लूटा मुल्लान लूटा सिंध को गुलाम किया, जजिया कर जैसे करो को उसने लागू कराया था, हिंदुओं की जान को हाँ उसने खेल बनाया था, विधवा विकलांग पंडित छोड़कर ना जाने उसने क्या दर्शाया था, दिल में रहम की जगह थी या नाटक उसने बनाया, लोगों को पीड़ा भी दी तो मरहम उसने लगाया.
India is a nation of warriors. Warriors not only molded by their own people, but also strengthened by foreign invasions. Referred to by some historians as the invader's paradise, India has confronted numerous foreign incursions, spanning from the Aryan invasions in the ancient times to the Greek and Seleucid invasions during the transitional period, and later the Arab invasion led by Muhammad bin Qasim. Qasim's subjugation of Punjab and Sindh left a profound impact on the broader society. Subsequently, between 1001 and 1206 AD, the Turkish invasions reshaped history, with figures like Muhammad of Ghori and Ghazni invading the prosperous Indo-Gangetic plains and plundering their riches. This period marked the decline of small princely states and the expansion of global trade connections. As we delve further into the medieval era, we observe a significant enhancement of military capabilities across various regions of India. During the evolution of the slave dynasty, Qutbuddin Aibak formed a standing army and consolidated his control over northern India, even during the lifetime of Ghori. From my viewpoint, this marked the strengthening of the Delhi Sultanate's authority through the development of cavalry and artillery units within its military, making it the preeminent military force in many Muslim communities. Shivaji employed rudimentary technology and communicated with foreign entities to gain insights into their methods of constructing large boats and ships. Thus, in my view, this is the current stature of the Indian military, a formidable force whose foundations have been fortified by countless dynasties and visionary leaders hailing from diverse communities and geographic regions.
असीम अंधकार में भटक रहे सजल नयन, न पथ दे रही धरा, न ज्योति दे रहा गगन, समय कहीं बहक गया, कहीं चहक गया, न तुम वहीं, न मैं वही, समय हमें बदल गया, समय हमें बदल गया. People who choose to ignore history tend to miss out the important lessons it had to teach. During the medieval period in India, the subcontinent was divided into various regional kingdoms. हमारे यहाँ चोलास थे, राजपूत थे, Deccan Sultanate थी. And then came the Mughals. Just imagine a scene straight out of an epic adventure where destiny comes together to lay the foundation of the magnificent Mughal Empire. Babur's establishment of the Mughal Empire laid the foundation of one of the most influential dynasties in the history of India. जब बादशाहों के मुंह से खुदा की तारीफ निकले, हमने उसको ताजमहल के रूप में देखा. From Bollywood songs to advertisements today, and of course being one of the 7 wonders, let's reflect upon the profound words of Akbar. गौर फरमाइएगा, इबादत के आदाब से खालिक ने हमें नवाजा है. It is through the grace of divine wisdom that we have been bestowed the privilege of this remarkable era. The Mughals focused on harnessing the power of gunpowder, as one of my delegates mentioned here. They used more of traditional methods, dhanush, talwar, dhal, and what not. Historical takes on the Mughal Empire are like a colorful spice bazaar, where different scholars offer their unique flavors of interpretation. European visitors like Sir Thomas Roe wrote positively about his experience at the Mughal court. British historians like James Mill brewed a cup of controversy, stirring in the idea of a Muslim Mughal rule over a Hindu majority. In his book, Irfan Habib provides insights into the socio-economic and political dynamics of the Mughal era. After centuries of enduring the rise and fall of empires, Mughal to British, we proudly sit here as united and offer homage to our great nation. And well, that being said, I would like to end my speech with a quote. सौगंध मुझे इस धरती की, ये देश नहीं मिटने दूंगा, ये देश नहीं रुकने दूंगा. वचन है मेरा भारत माँ को, तेरा शीश नहीं झुकने दूंगा, तेरा शीश नहीं झुकने दूंगा.
The Mughals have had an undeniable impact on India and its history. From them implementing their brilliant military strategies, to them building beautiful monuments with their brilliant architectural skills, and all the way to them considering India their home and intertwining their rich cultural heritage with ours. But we must admit, their invasions in India have been characterized by brutality, betrayal, and endless pillaging. Many factors played a role in the establishment of the Mughal Empire, namely disunity among kingdoms, the fall of the Delhi Sultanate, and the infighting and betrayal within kingdoms. On one hand, I admire the courage of Babur in defending India from the Mongols, but I must admit, the same shades were not seen in his son Humayun, who was defeated easily by Sher Shah Suri and exiled to Persia. But even though Humayun won the last war, I admire and I applaud Sher Shah's political, administrative and welfare initiative. Humayun died falling off a staircase in his library and was replaced with a 13-year-old child, a 13-year-old named Akbar. Akbar was young and very young at the time, so he had to entrust his empire to Behram Khan because he could not rule at an age of just 13. Behram Khan ruled with an iron fist and was famous for his absolutely tyrannical methods, but was eventually ousted due to unrest within the military. Akbar, on the other hand, had two main military strategies, which were matrimonial alliances and his recruitment system. Akbar married several daughters of really strong kingdoms, such as Harka Bai and Raja Bharmal of Amber, which is a perfect segue into my next point, which is that Akbar was very religiously tolerant towards religion and thus towards Rajputs, who helped him with all their military prowess, such as Raja Man Singh. His other military tactic was how he gathered his army. He didn't recruit his soldiers directly, but instead used the Mansabdari system, which basically meant that that nobles and local lords would be provided with special favors and ranked favorably depending on the number of soldiers they provided. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that the Mughals should be evaluated not as a whole, but individually. I can say this without being a hypocrite, because jizya, which was a very heavy tax on people, was removed by Akbar. He also inaugurated several Ibadat Khane, which were places for several different types of Muslims to convene and discuss religion without fear of punishment.
The medieval period in India, spanning from the 7th to the 16th century, was characterized by the coexistence of diverse cultures, the rise and fall of powerful dynasties, leaving a lasting impact on the subcontinent's rich history. It was a time of cultural unity, economic prosperity, and political upheaval that set up the stage for developments in the Indian subcontinent. The period witnessed a rich exchange of cultures and ideas between the incoming Islamic rulers and existing Hindu and Buddhist traditions. This led to the development of Indo-Islamic architecture, art, and literature, exemplified by structures like the Qutub Minar and fusion of Persian and Indian artistic styles. Thus, the period was a very progressive one.
The mighty Delhi Sultanate. The period started when the Second Battle of Tarai. In the battle, Prithviraj Chauhan was defeated by the Muhammad of Ghor, who in turn left his slave Qutbuddin Aibak to rule over Delhi, thus marking the humble beginning of the first dynasty of the Delhi Sultanate, the Mamluk dynasty. Aibak was succeeded by his slave son-in-law Shamsuddin Iltutmish. Then came the Khilji dynasty, amongst whom Alauddin Khilji stands the tallest for many of his notable achievements. He realized that the empire's economy and military might go hand in hand, something which even Pakistan has not understood till
here. All the student delegates, there is one common aspect to their positions about monuments built by the Mughals, about the contributions of the Mughals. That seems to be the recurring theme. They should ask themselves only one simple question, and they should ask this question through their sources of history. Why do we not find such fantastic monuments being constructed outside the Indian subcontinent? If this was exactly Islamic architecture, why do we not find it outside of Bharat or Bharatiya subcontinent? The answer to that is very uncomfortable. The amount of artisans and highly skilled people who were exported as slaves to Central Asia during the Mughal period, and post that export, how many similar mosques were built in Central Asia and in Persia? That's a question we never ask. When people keep citing the fact that Bharat's contribution to the world economy was 27% during the Mughal period, they don't realize a significant portion of the contribution was not coming from spices or gold. It was coming from human resources being exported as slaves.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Nobody wants to answer this point, or nobody wants to look into this. There is a fantastic, let's say, talk on this subject on Sangam Talks by this researcher by the name Sai Priya. Please watch it. And source after source, document after document is actually presented there. What does this tell you? Now I'll tie that into the question that you posed. We are keen to look at history with rose-tinted glasses. We are hoping to find humanity in instances of barbarity when they don't exist. In your own question, allow me to say this, there's a problem. You cannot run away from this tutu meme at all. You've been trying to run away from it for a very long time. You tried to run away during Khilafat, you failed. 25 years later, there's the partition of this country on religious lines, citing the two-nation theory. Two-nation theory has found more than one base today, one in Pakistan and outside of that, because Pakistan is not a mentality, it's not a geography, it's a mentality. So the question is not how do you address the state of Pakistan, the question is how do you address the mindset called Pakistan, which is not limited to a particular geography. Unless and until you ask this question and you're willing to take certain hard positions, even uncomfortable positions, you will constantly find yourself revisiting 1946 and 1947 on a regular basis. The answer does not lie in burying differences. The answer lies in dealing with those differences and asking hard